Pearl Warren had been called worthless for so long that she'd almost started to believe it. Her hands trembled as she swept the saloon floor, gathering dust and cigarette ash while trying to ignore the leering glances of patrons who saw her as nothing more than a stain on the backdrop of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878. Warren girl. "You missed a spot," hollered Malone, the saloon owner, pointing to a puddle of spilled whiskey. "Just like your ma, good for nothing but taking up space." Pearl kept her eyes down, 22 years of practiced submission holding her tongue. The townsfolk had written her off from birth, the daughter of a poor washerwoman who died coughing blood, leaving Pearl to fend for herself in a town that had already decided her worth. "Leave her be, Malone." The voice cut through the saloon noise like a knife. Pearl didn't look up immediately, having learned that drawing attention to herself only brought trouble. But something about the newcomer's voice, deep, measured, with an unfamiliar accent, made her risk a glance. He stood by the bar, trail dust still clinging to his denim pants and worn leather vest. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing eyes that reminded Pearl of the turquoise her mother once wore on a string around her neck, the only beautiful thing they'd ever owned before they'd had to sell it for food. "And who might you be, sticking your nose where it don't belong?" Malone challenged, hand drifting toward the shotgun beneath the bar. The stranger didn't flinch. "Tucker James. Just rode in from Tucson. Thought I might find some civility, but seems I was mistaken." Malone's face reddened. "This is my establishment, and that there is my serving girl. I'll treat her how I please." Tucker's gaze shifted to Pearl, taking in her threadbare dress and the bruise purpling her cheekbone from where Malone had struck her yesterday. Something dangerous flickered across his face. "How much does she owe you?" Tucker asked quietly. "What? The girl?" "You're treating her like property, so I'm asking what she owes." Pearl's heart fluttered like a trapped bird. Nobody had ever spoken about her this way, like she might be something worth purchasing. Malone snorted. "She ain't worth nothing to nobody. Her ma died owing me for rent in the room upstairs. I keep her fed, don't I? Let her sleep in the storage room. I'll pay whatever her mother owed plus a month's wages for her." The saloon fell silent. Pearl's broom clattered to the floor. Tucker James looked directly at her then, his gaze steady. "That is, if the lady would prefer employment elsewhere." "She would." The words escaped Pearl's lips before she could stop them. That evening changed everything. As they walked away from Malone's saloon, Pearl clutching her few possessions wrapped in a shawl, she asked the question burning in her mind. "Why would you do that, sir? You don't know me." Tucker James didn't break stride. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see what they see." "And what do they see?" He stopped then, turning to face her fully. "They see someone worthless." His voice softened. "But they're wrong, Miss Warren, dead wrong." Pearl's throat tightened. "And what do you see?" Tucker's eyes held hers. "Someone worth everything." The words hung in the dusty evening air between them, the beginning of a story neither could have predicted. Tucker James had not come to Copper Creek by accident. After years as a cavalry scout and then a Texas Ranger, he tracked a notorious bandit to this remote corner of the Arizona Territory. What he hadn't planned on was finding Pearl Warren. "I've rented a small house on the edge of town," he explained as they walked. "I need someone to keep it while I'm working. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. Proper employment with proper wages." Pearl studied him skeptically. "What kind of work brings you to Copper Creek, Mr. James? We're hardly on the way to anywhere important." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm hunting someone. That's all you need to know for now." The small house was modest but clean, with 2 separate rooms, a luxury Pearl could scarcely comprehend after years in Malone's storage closet. "This is your room," Tucker said, showing her a space with an actual bed. simple but covered with a real quilt. "There's a lock on the door. Use it." Pearl blinked back unexpected tears. "Mr. James, I don't understand why you're doing this." "Tucker," he corrected. "And maybe I'm just tired of seeing people treated like they don't matter." That night, Pearl lay awake in her new bed, the softness of the mattress almost uncomfortable after years on a straw pallet. Tucker James was a mystery, his kindness even more so. Men, in Pearl's experience, never gave anything without expecting something in return. She resolved to be vigilant, to wait for the moment his true intentions revealed themselves. But days passed, and Tucker proved himself different. He rose early, left for hours pursuing his mysterious work, and returned in the evenings to eat whatever simple meal Pearl had prepared. He spoke to her with respect, asking about her day, sharing stories of places he'd seen. Pearl learned he'd grown up in Texas, fought briefly in the war as a boy too young to enlist properly, and afterward had ridden with the Rangers. His answers about why he'd left that life remained vague, but Pearl didn't push. Everyone had secrets, and she was grateful enough for his kindness not to pry. On the 7th day, trouble came to their door. Pearl was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders, Malone among them, pulled up to the small house. "Well, look here, boys," Malone sneered. "The Warren girl playing house. Found yourself a protector, did you?" Pearl's hands trembled, but she faced them squarely. "Mr. James has given me honest employment, Mr. Malone, that's all." One of the other men, the town's deputy, spat tobacco juice in the dirt. "That ain't what folks are saying. Town's got standards, girl. Your mama was bad enough." "My mother was a good woman who worked herself to death for scraps from men like you," Pearl said, surprising herself with her boldness. Malone's face darkened. "Watch your mouth. James ain't here to protect you now. But I am here." Tucker's voice came from behind Pearl. He must have returned quietly through the back. He stood in the doorway, not visibly armed but radiating a calm danger that made the horses shift nervously. "This ain't your town, James," said the deputy. "We don't know you or your business." "My business is my own," Tucker replied evenly. "Miss Warren's employment is honest and proper. If you're suggesting otherwise, you're questioning my honor. Is that what you're doing?" The 3 men exchanged glances. Even in the remote territories, certain codes existed among men. Questioning another man's honor directly was an invitation to violence. "Just making sure everything's on the up and up," the deputy muttered, backing down. "It is," Tucker said. "Now, unless you have official business, I'd appreciate it if you'd ride on. Miss Warren and I have work to do." After they left, Pearl's legs nearly gave out from the tension. "They'll be back," she whispered. "They've never let me have anything good." Tucker gently guided her to a chair. "Why do they hate you so much, Pearl? What happened with your mother?" Pearl stared at her calloused hands. No one had asked about her mother in years. "She came here pregnant with me, unmarried. My father was apparently some mine owner's son passing through. She took in washing, cleaned at the saloon. Malone let us stay in a room above the saloon in exchange for her. Additional services." Tucker's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "She got sick when I was 16, consumption, couldn't work anymore. Malone said we'd built up debt for the room. When she died, he said I had to work it off. That was 6 years ago." Pearl's voice dropped to a whisper. "The debt never seemed to get smaller." Tucker's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "You don't owe him anything anymore. I paid it all with witnesses. You're free, Pearl." That night changed something between them. Pearl began to trust that Tucker's kindness might be genuine, and Tucker seemed to let down some of his guard. As weeks passed, their routine became comfortable. Pearl kept the house, started a small garden, and occasionally ventured into town for supplies. holding her head higher despite the whispers. Tucker continued his mysterious work, sometimes not returning until late, occasionally with scratches or dust that spoke of hard riding. Pearl began to notice little things, the way Tucker's eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he always removed his hat when entering the house, his habit of humming old ballads when he thought no one was listening. She found herself watching for his return each day, her heart beating faster at the sound of his horse approaching. One evening in late September, Tucker returned with a grim expression and a long cut on his forearm. "You're hurt," Pearl exclaimed, already moving to heat water. "It's nothing. Just a scratch." But he let her clean and bandage it anyway. "Were you in a fight?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Tucker sighed. "The man I'm looking for, he's closer than I thought. He has friends in town." "Is it dangerous, your work?" His eyes met hers. "Yes, but I'm careful." Pearl's fingers lingered on his arm. "Tucker, I don't even know what you do. Who are you hunting? Why?" Tucker was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke softly. "His name is Frank Slater. 5 years ago, he and his gang attacked a homestead near El Paso. Killed the husband, the wife, and daughter." He swallowed hard. "They suffered before they died." Horror filled Pearl. Were they your family?" "No," Tucker said. "But I was the ranger who found them. I promised myself I'd find every man responsible." His eyes had a haunted look. "Slater is the last one. And he's here." "In Copper Creek," Tucker nodded. "He's calling himself Francis Smith now, runs the mining office." Pearl gasped. "Mr. Smith. But he seems so respectable. Men like him are good at seeming respectable. I need proof before I can take him in." "Take him in?" Pearl's brow furrowed. I assumed you were hunting him to kill him." Tucker shook his head. "I'm not a vigilante, Pearl. I'm still working with the law, even if I'm not wearing a badge anymore. I want Slater to stand trial for what he did." Relief and admiration flooded through Pearl. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Tucker looked at her with surprise, then concern. "This isn't your fight." "You made it my fight when you helped me," Pearl said firmly. "Let me help you." Tucker hesitated, then slowly nodded. "You could listen. Women hear things men don't. Smith doesn't know you're connected to me. If you hear anything about him, any past he mentions." Pearl nodded, determination rising within her. No one had ever valued her enough to ask for her help before. The next day, Pearl went to town with new purpose. She visited the general store, lingering to catch gossip. She walked past the mining office, observing the man who called himself Francis Smith, a well-dressed man with a neat beard and cold eyes that never seemed to smile when his mouth did. Over the next weeks, Pearl gathered fragments of information. Smith had arrived in Copper Creek 2 years earlier, buying into the mining office with cash no one questioned. He attended church, made donations to town improvements, but kept to himself otherwise. Pearl reported everything to Tucker, who added each detail to his growing case against Slater. Their evenings together lengthened as they talked, not just about Slater but about their lives, their hopes. Tucker told Pearl about growing up on a small ranch, losing his parents to fever, joining the Rangers to find purpose. Pearl shared memories of her mother, the stories she'd told, the dreams she'd had for her daughter's future. One evening, as October painted the desert in gold and crimson, Tucker returned with news. "I found something," he said, excitement edging his voice. "Old wanted posters and witness statements from Texas. If I can get the circuit judge to come through here, it might be enough to arrest him." Pearl smiled, but her heart sank a little. Once Slater was captured, Tucker would have no reason to stay in Copper Creek. No reason to keep employing her. The thought of returning to her old life or facing an uncertain future alone felt suddenly unbearable. Tucker must have read something in her expression. "Pearl, what's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I'm happy for you. You'll finally complete your mission." Tucker studied her face. "And then what? You're wondering what happens to you, to us?" The word "us" hung in the air between them. "Is there an us, Tucker?" Pearl asked softly. Tucker moved closer, his hand reaching to touch her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "I'd like there to be, if you would." Pearl leaned into his touch. "People would talk, more than they already do." "Let them," Tucker said, his voice low. "I've never cared much for other people's opinions." When he kissed her, it was like coming home to a place she'd never been before, both familiar and wonderfully new. His arms around her felt like safety, his heartbeat against hers a promise. That night changed everything again. Tucker no longer slept in the second room but shared Pearl's bed, holding her through the night as if she were precious. For the first time in her life, Pearl felt truly valued, truly seen, but danger was closing in. As Tucker's evidence against Slater mounted, the man himself began to sense the net tightening. Pearl noticed him watching her in town, his cold eyes calculating. Twice, she spotted men following her home, only to disappear when she changed direction. "He knows something's happening," Pearl told Tucker one evening. "He watches me like he's trying to place my face." Tucker's expression grew troubled. "Maybe you should stay home for a while, not go into town." "And let him know he's frightened me." Pearl shook her head. "Besides, the circuit judge arrives in 3 days. We're so close, Tucker." Tucker took her hands in his. "Pearl, I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. You've become everything to me." Pearl's heart swelled at his words. "And you to me, but I won't hide, not anymore." The next day, disaster struck. Pearl was returning from the general store when a wagon pulled alongside her on the quiet street leading out of town. "Miss Warren," Francis Smith called, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Allow me to offer you a ride. It's a warm day for walking." Pearl's mouth went dry. "Thank you, Mr. Smith, but I enjoy the walk." Smith's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I insist. I've been hoping for a chance to speak with you." Before Pearl could refuse again, 2 men appeared behind her. One gripped her arm while the other quickly checked the street was empty. In seconds, they had forced her into the wagon, a hand clamped over her mouth to stifle her scream. As they drove out of town, Smith turned to face her, all pretense of civility gone. "Now, Miss Warren, you're going to tell me why your friend is so interested in my business, and who exactly he is." Pearl's fear was overwhelming, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Smith." The blow caught her across the face, snapping her head to the side. "Don't play games with me, girl. Nobody in this town would miss you if you disappeared. They called you worthless long before I came along." Despite her terror, anger flared within Pearl. "My name is Pearl Warren. I am not worthless and people will look for me." Smith laughed, cold and cutting. "One drifter. He'll move on soon enough. Men like him always do." The wagon traveled into the hills above town, eventually stopping at an abandoned mining shack. The men dragged Pearl inside and tied her to a chair. Smith paced before her, his respectable facade completely gone. "Your friend's name is Tucker James, isn't it? Former Texas Ranger." Pearl's silence was answer enough. "I thought so," Smith Slater continued. "I've been hearing rumors about a ranger tracking down Carlson's old gang. Didn't think he'd find me here, but I've always been careful." He leaned close to Pearl's face. "Now you're going to help me set a trap for him." "I won't," Pearl said, her voice steadier than she felt. Slater smiled. "You won't have to do anything but sit there. He'll come for you. Men like him are predictable that way, and when he does—" He drew a finger across his throat. Hours passed. Pearl tested her bonds but couldn't loosen them. One of Slater's men kept watch outside while the other dozed in the corner. Slater himself had ridden back to town, presumably to maintain his alibi. As night fell, Pearl's fears grew. Tucker would certainly come looking for her when she didn't return. He was skilled, but Slater had laid a trap and Pearl was the bait. A commotion outside startled her. The dozing guard jumped to his feet, drawing his gun. A shot rang out, followed by silence. The guard moved cautiously to the window. The door burst open. The second guard stumbled in, bleeding from his shoulder. "He's here. James is." Another shot silenced him. Tucker stood in the doorway, revolver in hand, eyes quickly scanning the room until they found Pearl. Relief flooded his face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, quickly moving to untie her. "No," Pearl gasped. "But Tucker, it's a trap." "Slater, I know," Tucker said grimly. "He's not here, is he?" Pearl shook her head. "He went back to town, said you'd come for me and I did," Tucker said, helping her to her feet. "But I wasn't foolish enough to come alone." As if on cue, voices called from outside. Pearl recognized the town sheriff among them. "Sheriff Monroe was skeptical of my claims about Smith," Tucker explained as he checked Pearl for injuries. "But a kidnapped woman was evidence he couldn't ignore. He's got men watching Slater's house in town." Pearl sagged against him, relief making her legs weak. "You came for me." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "Did you think I wouldn't, Pearl, when I couldn't find you?" His voice broke. "I've never been so frightened." "Slater said men like you always move on, that no one would miss me." Tucker's face darkened. "Slater is wrong. You're worth everything to me, Pearl." Everything. The next day brought chaos to Copper Creek. Francis Smith, exposed as Frank Slater, had barricaded himself in the mining office. The sheriff and Tucker maintained a tense standoff, while the town buzzed with the revelation that their respected businessman was a wanted murderer. Pearl, despite Tucker's protests, refused to stay behind. "I need to see this finished," she insisted. "For both of us." By midday, smoke began to rise from the mining office. Whether Slater had started the fire deliberately or accidentally, no one could say. As flames engulfed the building, the door finally burst open and Slater emerged, gun blazing. Tucker pushed Pearl behind him as bullets flew. Sheriff Monroe fell, wounded in the leg. Another deputy returned fire. Slater's wild shots splintered wood and shattered windows as townspeople scattered. Then suddenly, impossibly, Slater was turning his gun toward Pearl, hatred twisting his features. "You worthless!" Tucker's shot hit him squarely in the chest. Slater stumbled backward, surprise replacing hatred in his eyes. His gun clattered to the street as he fell. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Tucker moved cautiously forward, kicking Slater's gun away before checking for a pulse. He looked up at Sheriff Monroe, who had dragged himself to sitting position against a water trough, and shook his head. Frank Slater was dead. In the days that followed, the circuit judge arrived to a very different situation than expected. Instead of presiding over Slater's trial, he heard testimony about the shootout, ultimately ruling that Tucker had acted in defense of others. Pearl found herself the object of curiosity rather than scorn. The town that had labeled her worthless now viewed her with something approaching respect, the woman who had helped bring down a dangerous criminal. "They're all hypocrites," Pearl said bitterly as she and Tucker sat on the porch of their small house a week after the shooting. "Now they want to act like they never treated me poorly." Tucker took her hand. "People are complicated. They follow each other like sheep until something forces them to see differently." Pearl sighed. "What happens now, with Slater gone?" "I was thinking about that," Tucker said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I received a letter today from a friend in Colorado. There's a ranch for sale near Denver. Good land, fair price." Pearl looked up, hope and uncertainty warring in her chest. "A ranch," Tucker nodded. "I've saved most of my ranger pay over the years. Never had a reason to spend it until now." He took a deep breath. I'd like to buy it, Pearl. Start fresh. Raise horses, maybe some cattle. You're leaving then, Pearl said softly, her heart sinking despite having expected this. Tucker's fingers tipped her chin up until their eyes met. I'm hoping we're leaving together. Pearl's breath caught. Together. As husband and wife, Tucker said, his voice dropping to a whisper. If you'll have me. Tears filled Pearl's eyes as joy bloomed in her chest. You want to marry me, even knowing what people say about me. Tucker's expression grew fierce. I don't give a damn what anyone says about you. I love you, Pearl Warren. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you in that saloon, trying so hard to stay invisible but shining so bright I couldn't look away. Pearl threw her arms around his neck, laughing through her tears. Yes, yes, I'll marry you, Tucker James. They were married 3 days later by the circuit judge before he left town. The ceremony was small, just the two of them. The judge, and surprisingly, Sheriff Monroe on crutches and Mrs. Bradley from the general store, who had always been kinder to Pearl than most. As they prepared to leave Copper Creek the following week, their few possessions packed in a wagon Tucker had purchased, Malone approached them outside the general store. Heard you're leaving, he said gruffly, not quite meeting Pearl's eyes. That's right, Tucker replied, his arm protective around Pearl's waist. Malone shifted uncomfortably. I just wanted to say, that is. He cleared his throat. Your mother was a good woman, Miss Warren. Never should have treated her or you the way I did. Pearl was too stunned to speak. After a moment, she managed a nod. As Malone walked away, Tucker pressed a kiss to her temple. You see, even the most stubborn minds can change. Maybe, Pearl said, watching Malone's retreating back. Or maybe he's just afraid of you. Tucker laughed, the sound warming her heart. Either way, it's a start. And where we're going, no one knows either of us. We can be whoever we choose to be. The journey to Colorado took nearly 3 weeks. They traveled at an easy pace, stopping in small towns along the way. For Pearl, who had never left Copper Creek before, each new horizon was a revelation. Tucker delighted in showing her river crossings, mountain passes, and starlit skies unobscured by buildings. They reached the ranch in early December, snow already dusting the distant peaks. The property was everything Tucker's friend had promised: a sturdy main house, a good barn, pasture islands stretching toward mountains that took Pearl's breath away. It needs work, Tucker said as they stood hand in hand, surveying what was now theirs. The fences need mending and the house could use fresh paint, but the bones are good. It's perfect, Pearl whispered, squeezing his hand. That first winter was hard but joyful. They worked from dawn until dusk, repairing, cleaning, preparing for spring when Tucker planned to buy their first horses. At night, they huddled together before the fireplace, making plans, sharing dreams, their love deepening with each passing day. By spring, the ranch was transforming. Pearl planted a vegetable garden larger than she'd ever imagined owning. Tucker bought 6 mares and a stallion at auction, the beginning of the horse breeding operation he envisioned. They hired 2 local boys to help with the heavier work. Their nearest neighbors, the Hendersons, lived 5 miles away but became fast friends, inviting them for Sunday dinners and helping when a late blizzard threatened the newborn foals. It was Mrs. Henderson who first noticed, at a dinner in late summer. Pearl, dear, she said quietly as they washed dishes together, are you expecting a little one? Pearl's hand stilled on the plate she was drying. I think I might be. I haven't told Tucker yet, wanted to be sure. Mrs. Henderson smiled warmly. The way you've been glowing, and your hand going to your stomach when you think no one's looking. I'd say you're about 3 months along. That night, when they were alone in their bedroom, Pearl told Tucker her suspicion. His face transformed with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Pearl covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" Tucker gathered her into his arms, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Pearl, when I found you, I never imagined my life could be this full. You've given me everything." As her pregnancy progressed, Pearl sometimes found herself thinking of her mother, how different her own child's life would be, born into love and security rather than shame and struggle. She wrote these thoughts in a journal, a letter to the mother who had done her best in impossible circumstances. Their daughter was born the following spring, a tiny perfect girl with Tucker's turquoise eyes and Pearl's determined chin. They named her Hope, for all she represented to them both. Standing by the cradle that Tucker had crafted himself, Pearl watched their daughter sleeping peacefully. "They called me worthless," she murmured. "All those years. If I'd believed them, if I'd never left that town." Tucker's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "But you did leave. You were brave enough to take a chance on something better." Pearl turned in his arms. "Because you saw something in me worth saving." Tucker shook his head, his eyes serious. "I didn't save you, Pearl. You saved yourself. I just gave you a chance to show everyone, including yourself, what you've always been worth." "And what's that?" Pearl asked, her heart full. Tucker's smile was tender as he gazed at her and their sleeping child. "Everything," he said simply. "You're worth absolutely everything." 5 years passed, bringing prosperity to the James Ranch. Their horse breeding business thrived, their reputation for quality stock spreading throughout Colorado territory. They added to their holdings, building a larger stable and hiring more hands. Hope grew into a spirited, bright child who followed Tucker everywhere, absorbing his knowledge of horses like a sponge. A brother joined her when she was 3, Thomas, named for Tucker's father, a sturdy boy with Pearl's quiet determination. Pearl, once so accustomed to invisibility, found herself respected in the growing community. She helped establish a small school, taught other women to read, and even served on committees when Denver's expanding influence reached their valley. On rare occasions, memories of Copper Creek surfaced, a nightmare that left her gasping in the darkness, Tucker's arms pulling her back to safety, a moment of doubt when praise felt foreign to her ears. But these moments grew fewer with each passing year, outnumbered by joy. In their 10th year at the ranch, a letter arrived from Arizona. Sheriff Monroe, now retired, wrote that Malone had died, leaving the saloon to be sold. Almost as an afterthought, he mentioned that before his death, Malone had apparently set aside a small sum for the Warren girl if she's ever found. Tucker found Pearl on the porch that evening, the letter in her hands, her expression thoughtful. "Are you all right?" he asked, settling beside her. Pearl nodded slowly. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel something more, anger or satisfaction, but it's like hearing about a stranger." Tucker took her hand. "What will you do with the money?" Pearl smiled, the decision already made. "I'm going to donate it to the school building fund. Seems fitting, turning something from my past into something for the future." Tucker kissed her hand. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Pearl leaned against his shoulder, watching their children playing in the yard with the new puppy Tucker had brought home last week. Hope, now 9, was showing Thomas how to teach the dog to sit, her dark hair escaping its ribbons, her face alight with purpose. "You tell me every day," Pearl said softly, "in 1,000 different ways." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant gold and crimson, Pearl thought of the frightened young woman she had once been, the girl who believed herself worthless because others had told her so. How far she had come from that storage room floor, that broom in her calloused hands. "What are you thinking about?" Tucker asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. Pearl smiled. I'm thinking about value, how it isn't something others give us or take away. It's something we've always had, if only we can believe it. Tucker's eyes, still that remarkable turquoise even with the fine lines that now crinkled at their corners, studied her face with the same intensity as when they'd first met. You've always been priceless, Pearl, from the very beginning. Pearl kissed him then, beneath the Colorado sky, surrounded by the life they'd built together, a life neither could have imagined that day in a dusty Arizona saloon when a stranger had stood up for a girl everyone called worthless, and in doing so, helped her discover her own immeasurable worth.